Hello, hello, and hello. Welcome to the A Woman's Soul Restored podcast. We are in season 5, episode 12. And today we have once again another amazing guest who has a passion for what she does. Her name is Sarah Michelle Boes, and I'm not going to take any time away from her because she's a mental health advocate, but in a specific area. It's very unique because I love having unique guests on this podcast. And I would just I don't want to mess up what she does, so I'm just going to let her explain what she does and where did that passion come from. So I'm going to Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you. Yes.
Sometimes it's a little bit hard to describe what I do, just in the sense is I feel like maybe jack of all trades could be a little bit of a good description. I wear a lot of hats because I love a lot of things.
Awesome.
But really, at the core of everything I do, I feel like is advocacy. I am a family nurse practitioner, but I am also an entrepreneur. And I had this really cool and incredible and truly insane journey when COVID started, where I started my own test prep business. And I guess the way to put it would be like it kind of went viral a bit, in the sense like my test prep business was helping nurse practitioners pass their board exams. And no one in that space had ever talked about mental health as part of taking the exam. And I was kind of the first person to show up and be like, hey, I'm a brand new nurse practitioner, and I just passed this exam, and it was very stressful and very anxiety inducing for me because it's super high stakes to take that exam.
Right.
And I just really feel like this mental health portion of it would have been really helpful for me as I was preparing, and it should be a part of the conversation moving forward. And thousands, and I do mean thousands, of other people who were preparing for their exam felt that exact same way. And that was really incredible and really cool for me, because something that I had tried to hide and stuff down for a really long time was now something that I could be really transparent and authentic about and be like, hey, I have panic attacks and I was very obsessive over this exam and all of these different pieces. But let me show you what worked for me, and hopefully it will make your process a little easier. So all that being said, I went from making $40K as a nurse in 2019 to becoming a millionaire in 7 months in 2020. And my life was forever changed. And the lives of so many people around me were forever changed. And I'm so grateful for that business. And I ultimately went on to sell that business in 2022. And that's kind of part one of my story. Part two, and kind of the season that I'm in today, but I think the backstory is helpful because they're like, wait, what are you doing? And why is this happening? All the things, right?
Right.
So in June of 2022, I went on to sell that business. So I sold it into a bigger test prep brand. I went through an acquisition. That was truly the highest high of my life, both professionally and personally. I was like, it doesn't get better than this. This is the pinnacle.
Right.
And I was pregnant when I sold. And so just 3 weeks after selling my business, I was 36 weeks pregnant, and we found out that my daughter Meadow was going to have 4 heart defects. And so what I thought was normal, healthy, I mean, normal is always subjective, but what I thought was definitely going to be a healthy, hopefully happy baby, really turned into a baby that was going to have heart surgery in her first week of life, and a baby who was going to have another heart surgery by the time she was a year old to even have a chance at life. And that's not to say that I don't have drive or ambition, or like my entrepreneurial journey ended by any means. But it definitely took a pivot. But what I see kind of as like the invisible string through all of my journeys is just that mental health piece. And so I do a lot of advocacy work today in the congenital heart disease space, and we can definitely talk about that. But I also talk a lot about mental health as a heart mom, and mental health as an entrepreneur, and mental health as a female, and kind of bring all of these pieces together a little.
That is amazing that you were able to encompass all of that and make it, instead of here, and here, just blended it all and made it one space. And that's much more accessible and more realistic for people, because we live in a fast-paced society and we want it here and now. And I don't want to look three different places for when I can get it one place. So I totally understand, and I applaud you for making it simpler, making it easier.
That's my hope. Always. For all the things, all the projects I touch and all the things I do in my creative passions, like I want to make something that seems really big and scary and complex as simple and easy as it can be. And that was in my business, and that's been in my heart mom journey and all the different pieces.
Yes, it sounds like you have truly pulled that together. Um, so I think you explained a part of the passion. What brings that passion all the way full circle for you?
I think, a lot of my passion actually comes from teaching, which was part of why my business was successful, right? Because I mean, at its core, like, am I teaching you the content to pass the exam? Yes. And I'm also teaching you these mental health and these anxiety tools. And like, that really lit me up and that brought me a lot of purpose to like see the impact that it had in people's lives. Because we had a person one time, it was so cool. It wasn't cool that she had failed 2 decades ago, but she had failed her exam in 1999. She'd never had the courage to retake. And then she came and did my courses and she passed on the first try. And so this incredible, beautiful woman who could have been a nurse practitioner for the last 20 years is finally doing it and finally had her moment today. So that was really cool. Um, so I think about that in this advocacy space too. I do so much teaching because, I became a nurse practitioner before I was obviously a heart mom. But when I did, I had no idea the heart defects were the most common birth defect.
Mm,
And then when I kind of got into this heart mom journey with my daughter and kind of navigating what her future is going to look like, because she's going to have more heart surgeries in the future, and that is just part of our life and her path. Um, I found out all these just incredible statistics, and I won't throw out a lot of stats because I feel like I lose people pretty fast. But if there are two that people hear, this is what I want you to hear from this episode. Number one, heart defects are the most common birth defects, so that's 1 in 100. Not all of them require surgery, but still 1 in 100 is pretty significant.
yes.
But the more significant part is that heart defects are the least funded birth defect. So out of
Wow.
all the different things going on out there, they're the least funded, even though they're the most common. That was like brain breaking to me. The first time
Yes.
I heard that, I was like, there's no way that's true. And then if you could have seen like my gaping face when I had done more research, I was like, oh no, that is 1000% accurate. So that's kind of astonishing. So I love teaching people that because how can we change the future if we don't know something's a problem?
Right.
And then the other thing that I really love to teach about congenital heart disease in this space and heart kiddos is that it was just in 2009 that there were more adults living with CHD than children. And what that statistic actually means is it was the first time in history that these children were living into adulthood. And so, in the grand scheme of all grand schemes, like this is still a really new area of medicine. And it's still it's very much a space that we're still figuring out. And like, what are the true needs here? And how do we best move forward? And how do we try to create a world where ideally children are having less open heart surgeries? But I mean, in my like most audacious, beautiful world out there, like children having no open heart surgeries.
Yes. Yes. So it sounds like you're intertwined with the
Very
thing that
much.
you're passionate about, and you would have to be in order to do the research and be so thorough with it and be able to bring others into that fold by being a teacher. And how do you, or if do you, separate the emotional aspect of it? How do you remove your personal story and what you go through from when you're teaching it to somebody else so that you don't break down or you don't get emotional while you're teaching?
There's kind of that cliche phrase sometimes, but they're talking about turning like grief into purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, that has very much been my journey in the advocacy world is how do I turn grief into purpose and how do I make this something meaningful? Because I feel like otherwise it would kind of swallow me whole. And I also think that to do the kind of work that I want to do and inspire the kind of change that I want to see, the story has to be intertwined in it. I don't think there's a separation necessarily. Like, I have to show up and put on my nurse practitioner hat sometimes and be like, here are the stats. But then I
Yes.
also have to show up in my heart mom hat and be like, here's my story, here's Meadow's story, here's where they overlap. And
Yes.
now I want to inspire you to do something different, right? So I think for me, a lot of managing grief comes from some really great therapy, for sure.
Okay.
And I've done so much therapy work over the last few years, especially because when my daughter Meadow got out of the hospital was when I found out that I had obsessive compulsive disorder. And that's a whole different type of therapy and a whole different type of path than what I've been doing previously, but it was actually really well suited for the grief and the very scary, intrusive thoughts that I was feeling about my daughter at the time of like, what does her future look like? I've never lived with so much uncertainty in my life in a way. And OCD at its core, people always think it's hand washing. And I'm like, hand washing, okay, first of all, it's one type of OCD, it's like one flavor, but there's all these different types of flavors. And what OCD truly is at its core is just an intolerance of uncertainty. And so those people that are washing their hands 1,000 times, they want to be absolutely certain I don't have germs. I'm not going to get sick, like whatever their intrusive thing is. And I just live like deep in the depths of uncertainty because we never know when Meadow's next surgery is going to be. We just know there is going to be a next surgery. And that's really hard to
Yes.
sit with.
Yes. Um, you touched on something that I'm not gonna say I haven't went public. I've teetered around with it, but I'm borderline
Mm.
OCD, and to the point where I like things in order. Um, and I feel out of place if it's not. I'll go behind other people to create that order if I see things out
If
of
you
place.
need to.
Yeah, it's you can make it work to your advantage. And I've
It can definitely be both sides.
yes, yes, and I can say out of these I'm 58. So, I've definitely found ways to make it work to my advantage and not let it drive me crazy. If I'm not able to touch something, if I'm not able to change it to make it look like how I think it should look, it
Hard.
doesn't drive me absolutely crazy. It might drive me a little batty, but not absolutely crazy. So, I applaud what you're doing. When I read your story, I was like, that is so interesting to be able to, it's like you're on both sides. You're this, and then you're advocating, and then you have this precious baby that's right there that you have to nurture and you and your husband take care of. And
She's the
but
best.
yes, and part of that taking care of her is making sure that things are in place for her future.
Well,
Like,
I think you can't really like show up as a parent and be the kind of parent you want to be if you're not taking care of yourself, which is why, when Meadow got out of the hospital, I was like, I don't know what this is that I have going on right now. I was like, but it's not anything like what I've dealt with before, which is ultimately what led to me getting the OCD diagnosis. But
okay,
how incredible for her to be so teeny tiny at the time, being 6 months old, and for me to be able to go work on my brain and get myself in the best spot possible to show up
yes.
for her in the best way possible.
And I'm glad you said that. It's key that we take care of ourselves as mothers,
Always.
especially when they're little like that.
Mm.
You're the only
Being
person,
babies.
and if you're not healthy, and if you're not taking care of yourself, how are you going to take care of that little one? So
Yeah.
it's not selfish. It's not you being a bad person that you need to take care of you, because taking care of you ultimately takes care of that precious baby.
I think
So
it's the least selfish, actually.
yes, yes, and we live in a society where things can get so twisted.
Hmm.
But that is ultimately a sacrifice to say I need to take care of me in order so I can take care of my baby. Or if you have children, more than one, take care of my children, take care of my basic household responsibilities. You have to be okay, physically, mentally, emotionally, and how that looks for you is your wellness. Now, it might not look the same for everybody else because it's not everybody else's wellness. It's your
Yeah,
wellness. So it has to look a certain way for you, whether anybody else approves of it or not.
exactly. My journey, my path, I definitely needed the mental health. help and work.
Yes, yes, yes. I read something interesting because I try to go outside of the box when I have guests so I can keep up with them. Um, what are you doing with the Nortons Hospital?
Uh, that's been incredible for me. Norton Children's is the hospital that my daughter was treated at. She's had both of her heart surgeries there. And I think I'm kind of a hard patient. And I know I wasn't the patient, but I mean, I was in there with a teeny tiny baby. I might as well have
Yes,
been the patient in a
yeah,
lot of ways. And after working as a bedside nurse and being a nurse practitioner, like I just have high expectations and really high standards of the care I
right,
receive because I know what it should look like.
right.
I think it's a lot harder when you don't know what it should look like. So then when it is really bad, you just have no idea. Um, but I tell you all that to say that when we were receiving Meadows care, it was truly, and I don't mean truly exceptional. And it was so cool to see. They have a dedicated pediatric cardiac intensive care unit at Norton.
Okay.
And so they have a whole basically heart baby floor, if you want to think of it that way.
Um,
And to see the way that this team works together and just, you know, I had a little bit of a concern about Meadow. So basically, between her first surgery and her second surgery, her first surgery is 6 days old, her second at 4 months old.
mhm,
They told us that between that first and second surgery, it would be the most high risk time of her entire life. And we kind of had this almost like bat line to call. And I was a little bit concerned with Meadow. It was literally like the Saturday morning after Thanksgiving. And I was
mm,
like, I don't want to be this human. However, like her oxygen monitor's being kind of weird and I just don't feel good about it. And I mean, they called me back in 3 minutes, and that's on Thanksgiving weekend. And then when we brought her in, it was then time to have her second surgery. And so I was so grateful that I had called because it
yes.
really truly could have been emergent had I not. And
Mhm,
it really truly could have been emergent had they not called me back. So all that backstory to say that we ended up when we got out of the hospital. I remember me and my husband looking at each other, and the only thing that we had time to do between selling the business and finding out Meadow was sick and her being born was set aside some money that we knew that one day we wanted to donate. We just didn't know where. And I looked at my husband. I was like, I just want to give all of our money to the hospital. And I know that sounds a little reactionary, but to watch how they work and be like so awe-inspired by that, but also to see all of the families. Like we were in such a fortunate position when Meadow was super, super sick and we didn't know she was going to make it, to be there together, me and my husband, and make decisions together. And not every family gets that opportunity. And
right.
so I really, when I first called the hospital about making a donation, I was like, how can I support cardiac research and cardiac innovation? But also, how can I support families? Like, what does that look like?
Mhm,
And they were able to create this really cool, kind of complex and creative donation. But long story short, I kind of buried the lead. We ended up donating $15 million to our local
aw
children's hospital, which
awesome.
was truly one of the coolest days, and I do mean coolest days of my entire life, to be able
Yeah,
to do something like that. Because
yes.
if you remember, if you're out there listening, at the beginning of the podcast, I was like, I made 40K in 2019. So to have like this business success, this business sale, and then to be able to put it back into our local community and into the children's hospital that saved their daughter's life, then they ultimately ended up naming it's a very long name, so it's like pausing, trying to get it out. So it's the Norton Children's Congenital Heart Institute. They've named it in honor of our daughter, which was so beautiful.
Truly
So
amazing.
I almost burst into tears every time I say this. I like really have to like bring myself in. But yeah, it was so, so, so cool and incredible. And I actually this weekend they've invited us to be the chairs of kind of they call it the snowball or like their black tie gala for the year. And I have recently written a children's book about heart defects. So they're letting me give one of my books to each of the guests, which is really cool too.
Well, that is so awesome.
Yeah, it's really
When you
sweet.
can give back, that's truly the pinnacle of it all, you
My
know?
life's dream.
Yes, yes, to be able to give back to the entity that gave so much to you all unselfishly. Sound like they did more than their job. They went
By
above
far.
and beyond their job. And that's what you want for people that's caretakers. Yeah, they got a job to do, but you want them to really feel. They can't feel what you feel, but they can come close to it, to the point that they go above and beyond what they're supposed to do. They want to make sure not only that that baby is taken care of, but also the parents
Whole
are
squad.
taken care of. Yes, yes.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say real quick that you hear stories of when a child is sick, and if it's a couple, most of the time that couple can't handle that pressure. But I think it's amazing that you and your husband were able to stick in there together and deal with it together instead of separating. I know it was hard dealing with a child and the situation in totality, but I truly feel it's better to handle things together than apart.
No, I totally agree, and I'm like, I can't even begin to describe, and grateful's not the right word, like, it's so much more than that, but, like, how grateful I am for my husband and our relationship and the intentional work that we had done together to, like, set ourselves up to be parents. I mean, we we were married for a couple of years before we decided to have Meadow, and obviously, like, we were building the business and doing all these different things, but also in that time, like, as I was building the business, I was also doing a lot of work on myself, even though I didn't know it was OCD yet, but I was kind of doing some trauma work and some different things.
Right,
And I feel like we were just really set up for success to be in this kind of almost like worst case scenario. And I find that a lot of times, like, after a couple lives through something like that, they're either like, it's the best they've ever been with one another, or it's the worst of the
yeah,
worst. And we have very much had to figure out how we each navigate our own grief. You know, I do advocacy work. I'm flying to DC. I was in New Orleans last weekend at a big heart conference, but that's how I deal with my grief. That is not how my husband deals with his. He is not really interested in that, which
oh,
is totally fine and
right,
okay. And he's got his own way of dealing with it and managing it. And so my big thing is, it's like, okay, we each kind of have our own mental health work that we have to do now, right?
right,
And it doesn't have to be together how we do that, but how do we come back together at the end of the day, and how do we kind of really show up for Meadow too in the best way possible? Because
right,
we also we have to be very intentional with her and how we address her care and how we address her future, um, and being intentional too of like, one day she's going to have to advocate for herself, and how can we go ahead and kind of be instilling that today. And today she is 3,
mm,
but even at 3, which is such a beautiful age, by the way, she's so funny. But even at 3, we had strep throat over the weekend. We went to the pediatrician. The pediatrician's like, "Okay, where's your heart?" And like Meadow knows where her heart is, and I'm like, "Okay, where's your pacemaker?" She can show us where her pacemaker is, like in her belly. She can tell you what her diagnosis is, and all those things are really cool. And that is also the beauty of us parenting together and coming together to do that and set her up in this environment too.
yes. And it shows that even though both of you are busy, you have made time for her
Oh, we
in
are so
order for
busy.
her to be able to explain things that like her body, where things are on her body, can give her diagnosis. You have had to spend time with her. That's not nothing that's just fly by the night. That takes time. So just giving you and your husband the applaud and just really commend both of you for sticking in there together and being awesome parents and giving her an outlook and preparing her for her future and knowing that her mom and dad are going to be there with her every step of the way. That is beautiful. And it's a testament to what you can do together. You can co-parent and do that, but it's much easier for her to see mom and dad in the same house, for her to see y'all working with her together. That is beautiful, and that you have to have a love for a person to do that. That's not anything you just stay there for. Well, I'm just here
No.
for the. y'all are there for one another, and that's the awesome aspect of it, that it's truly a family endeavor with mom, dad, and Meadow. It's beautiful, beautiful.
I want her to be such a fierce advocate one day. So that
Yeah,
way, if a doctor or a nurse practitioner or whoever says something silly, she'll be like, oh no.
yeah,
She'll be like, I am this. But that's, really important because, like I said in the beginning too, it's such kind of a new area of medicine in the grand scheme of medicine. And so Meadow has to be that person for herself. And obviously, we will be those people for her for a while, but I also want her to be able to do it too.
yes. And time flies by so fast.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be here before you know it, where she'll be able to really stand up for herself and be able to speak for herself. But that's coming from that foundation that you all have set for her as her parents. So that's really a beautiful, and I want people to get this, because sometimes when they hear the diagnosis of a child that is going to have a future that may include surgeries or um, hospital stays or all that variances that goes in there, it's fearful.
It's
And they
hard.
may want to take the other route. They may want to, in essence, not really give in to that child emotionally like they need to. But you can do it, and you can still take care of yourself as well. Don't give up. Don't let that diagnosis get in your head and make it more than it is. Not saying it's not going to be easy, but you have what's inside of you to help you get through it for your child and for yourself. So I can't commend y'all enough, you and your husband, for what you're doing. And I hope many see this so that they can see it's possible, that it can be done. Is a diagnosis is not a death sentence for that child or for the parents. You have to hang in there. You have to do the work. You have to, you just have to, for that child and for yourself. You have to be fully invested in that child and yourself and what that future looks like for everybody involved.
Yeah, I think if when you're becoming a parent or you desire to become a parent, like you really have to truly be open to any outcome. And I know people are like, I will love the child regardless, etc. And I'm like, no, but like really like stop and consider like your child could have anything. Now, in the most likely scenario, they're going to be totally fine. But even with Meadows' diagnosis, like because I am a nurse practitioner and because I'm an anxious human, like I had a ton of like prenatal genetic testing. I had extra ultrasounds when I was pregnant, and we still like missed Meadows' heart defect at the end of the day. And part of that is just a gap in medicine because, long story short, Meadow has all four of the major pieces of her heart, if you want to think of it that way, like the four major sections. But there are holes and there are kind of like detours, and there's a lot of structural abnormalities. But if you have the four chambers of the heart, it's a 50-50 shot right now on prenatal ultrasound, whether you're going to get your diagnosis or not. And so it was just missed. And I think it was a lot for me really to take in. I think in my head, I was like, okay, her heart's got a bunch of stuff going on. However, that she doesn't have a genetic condition. We found out after she was born, she had a clean genetic panel, which is helpful. So if we get her heart fixed, then I think there's a world where she could be kind of a quote unquote normal kid. I mean, not that it's normal ever to have like your chest open for heart surgery. But in the grand scheme of things, we can almost like let her live a normal life. And during her second surgery, she ended up having a ton of complications, one of which was a brain bleed. And so we really didn't know what Meadows' future looked like. I mean, we had high hopes that it was going to be a kind of full recovery situation, but we really just had to watch her grow.
Right.
And to be able to sit with my husband in all of that fear and all of that anxiety and all of that stress and be like, no matter what happens, I love her regardless.
Mhm.
And I love our family
Yeah.
regardless. And I
Yeah.
am going to try to do whatever I can within my power to help her move forward and kind of move past this. we were so fortunate. So we left the hospital when she was like 5, 6 months old. And her follow-up about that brain bleed wasn't until she was 18 months old. I mean, that's how long of a span of a time they wanted to just like watch it unfold. And that was probably equally one of the best days of my life. Was we went to a developmental psychologist at 18 months old, and she was like, she's exceptional. She's like, I
Wow.
never would have had any idea. She's like, I can see so clearly, like, you guys work with her so much, because I really, she's like, I don't need to see her again. And I was like, I would love to never see you again, actually. So that would be incredible. Thank you so much for this gift.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Before we wrap up, do you have any final words, or do you have any like pearls of wisdoms or anything you would like to share?
I think a couple of different things. I think number one, if you're going through something really hard, I promise it feels bigger if you don't share about it. I think sometimes people worry about being annoying or being a burden or whatever else, or like nobody wants to hear this.
Right.
But I go on podcasts all the time and I go on social media all the time. And even though it's hard, I'll share about when Meadow went through a major complication and like almost died during her second surgery. Or I'll share about our journey and like my panic attacks that I used to have all the time and all these different pieces, right? So one, people feel less alone, but two, it like brings some levity to it for me as well. Just like as a human being, as a person, to like feel seen and heard. There, like that almost can't be stated enough. And two, I think if you're a medical parent, this is kind of niche advice, but I think it's still really important, is just remembering like you are the expert in your child. And you are your child's best advocate because you are the expert in your
Yes.
child.
Yes.
And there were so many little nuanced things when Meadow was in the hospital that I like, I would tell her team, like, no, you have to hear me on this. I was like, I know this might be a normal baby thing for another baby, but this is not a normal baby thing for my daughter, Meadow Boes. And
Right.
so, like, we need to look at something differently, or we need to look further. And so, just really leaning in, like, also remembering you and your medical team are on the same team. You're not on opposing teams.
Yes.
But truly remembering, like, no one knows your child better than you.
Amazing. Amazing insights to leave with. I will continue to follow you because I believe what you're doing is truly amazing. Um, and just speaks of your makeup and the person that you and your husband are together. Because when you're married, you're one. So it just speaks of you both together, working and making it happen, being the best parents for Meadow that's possible. And letting her be. I'm sure she's active and at 3 and just
She rides horses.
inquisitive.
She lives a
Yes.
whole life. She lives a full whole life. It's incredible.
Yes, yes, and that's beautiful that she can experience that,
Yeah.
that she can have a childhood and not look back at it as my parents made my childhood miserable. She can look at it and say my parents made my childhood awesome, and have those memories that she can take with her into adulthood. So I applaud you. I thank you for taking time out to share today and all the things that you do. I wish you the best. I wish you well. Um, if you would like to send an email to the podcast, send it to a woman soul restored at gmail.com. The website is www.livelifenow.lovelifenow.net. And the Facebook page is A Woman's Soul Restored. So I want to thank Sarah again for coming in. And this is Thanksgiving week. So you all have a happy and blessed Thanksgiving with your families. And Sarah, you and your husband have a happy and blessed Thanksgiving with Meadow. You just make it the best ever. And I know it
Oh,
will be.
always.
All right. Y'all be blessed. Goodbye.